Awesome. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Boston Office 365 User Group for February 2021. On the screen right now, we have links to all of the usual places where you can find us. As Dimitri just mentioned, this session is being recorded, and you should be able to find it on YouTube when we get around to posting it to YouTube. So keep an eye out for that. All right. The organizers of our group are Dimitri, who is a partner over at Turn Digital, myself at Wellington Street Consulting, and our speaker for today is also one of our organizers, and he is a technical lead, and that's Bill Gunning. We did not have a January presentation, so our last event was the holiday mingle. And I don't think we're going to have anything on YouTube for that one, so just ignore that bottom line. But since we last met, a few updates have come out, including Microsoft now saying that Excel formula language is now Turing complete. So for those of you that are unaware, Turing, basically something becoming Turing complete refers to it as being a fully fledged programming language. This comes on the heels of an announcement of a new function called Lambda. And the Lambda function basically allows you to create your own functions within Excel and then call them up by name later. So you could create a function, specify a name for it, and then call it up later and process it that way. And I gotta tell you, even if you're not doing anything super crazy fancy in Excel, but just a lot of stuff that has like several layers of if statements, Lambda is an excellent way to simplify that when you need to repeat it a couple of times. So good stuff. There was a sneak peek that was released for the new Outlook app bar. And this is supposedly going to be a preview of what the new navigation itself will end up looking like for Office 365. So it's believed that this is going to become a universal suite bar across all of the applications. That is completely unofficial at this point. So stay tuned for more news on that.
Yeah, Mike, sorry to interrupt. I think your mic is picking up a lot of background noise.
It's the doggies.
Yeah. My dogs seem to wait until I have conferences to do this. Okay. All right. The other really big announcement that has recently come out is Microsoft Viva. So Viva is a very interesting suite of products and really is kind of a family of products broken down into 4 separate categories of topics, connections, learning, and insights. About probably 75% of these are kind of rebranding and repackaging of existing products, with about 25% that's available that is genuinely new products. The Insights product is the only one that is currently available, and that's available directly in Teams and labeled as Insights, and is essentially a rebranding of the, which one is it? Dimitri? Is this My Analytics, or is this one of the other analytics packages?
Right. So this is a conjunction of Workplace Analytics and My Analytics.
Okay, that's what it is. All right. So the answer was both. Excellent. And yeah, so one of the reasons we're not going to do a deep dive on this right now is we are actually in the process of seeing if we can chase down a Microsoft product member to do a full presentation on this suite of things for a future session for our user group.
Cool.
I'm sorry, did somebody have a question?
No, I said that would be cool. We can get
Yeah. One of the other things that really caught my attention, and actually was the reason that I was still working on this deck when we started, is this announcement for creating a shared library within OneDrive. This is something that is currently available, I believe, in general release. It's definitely available in first release tenants.
So Mike,
And
can
yeah,
you hear me? So what I've noticed when you go to create a shared library, it actually creates a new SharePoint site. It literally goes into your SharePoint admin
so,
portal.
yeah, I was actually just
Yeah.
about to get into that. So one of the things that about this that is really interesting, the way that Microsoft's marketing is presenting this kind of leads you to believe that it creates a new library inside OneDrive, inside a user's OneDrive specifically for sharing. That turns out to not be the case. What this actually does is it creates a full team. So you can end up with a full team behind this system.
And it's very difficult if you've got to do compliance and auditing and things like that. So we've turned that off.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually the main reason I wanted to bring this up, is I'm sure many people's core reaction is going to be, good God, how do I turn it off? So.
Trust me, there was a rush to Google on that one.
So that's all I have for updates for this month. Is there anything else that anybody heard about on the update front?
We got something called milestones yesterday. Actually came in this morning.
Yeah, so milestones I didn't include here because milestones isn't really an update so much as it's just a Power Apps template that can be added. So Microsoft actually has a pretty decent library of Power App templates that you can choose and add in there. And don't get me wrong, the Milestones app is actually really nice. I like using it to reverse engineer it to figure out how they're doing some of the features that they're doing. But for those that aren't aware of it, the Milestones app is a purely Dataverse for Teams driven project management system. And because it's built in Dataverse for Teams, it is widely available to most bundled licenses and is very extendable. So if there's something you don't like about it, you can change it. Unlike many of Microsoft's other project management systems. So that's kind of nice.
You can see they're trying to fill the niche for those small projects for small companies, ones that can't afford those project licenses and don't need the Power Project.
Yeah, I think that's one niche. I think the ability to customize it is another really big niche, though.
Oh, it's huge. We're looking at it replacing a dashboard that we custom built ourselves in Power Apps because we like the way this looks better than what we built ourselves.
Yeah, I know a lot of people with that move to products like Asana and the like over Microsoft Project, and it has having nothing to do with the cost of the licensing. They just like the product better.
And your dog agrees?
You know, the dogs are perfectly quiet all day until I have
That's it.
an audience.
Sorry to interrupt, but just doing a quick time check. It's 6:30, and we probably want to get to Bill's presentation fairly soon.
Sure,
Mike, if you wouldn't mind just powering through the next few slides.
sure. Yeah. All right. So next up is a big thanks to our platinum sponsor of Turn Digital. So thank you very much for Turn Digital. They're able to sponsor us to keep the lights on and pay for all that cool software that we use to keep this stuff up and running. And someday, hopefully soon, we'll be able to meet in person and have pizza again. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yay.
Yay. And then without further ado,
Cool.
our very
Thank you.
own Bill Gunning is going to present to us the unintended consequences of sharing from SharePoint sites. Whatever do you mean, Bill? There are never any unintended consequences.
Oh, you got me the idea for that hook. So you were like, gotta hook him in.
I love it. No, that's great.
All right, so let's do
Take it
some-
away, sir.
Cool. So Mike did the introduction, unintended consequences in SharePoint. So again, my name is Bill Gunning. I've been in SharePoint for about 10 years, working with it. I've been working with it in the GCC tenant, so I work for the Commonwealth, and I've been working for different agencies in there, and currently I'm the technical lead. I've been primarily on the IT digital publishing side of the house for my whole career, really. I started in digital publishing and then went to desktop and then went to web development. So I did a lot of web development, Joomla, made my own content management system. And the last 10 years I've been a SharePoint advocate, working at the Commonwealth, trying to get it going. So I love to build and develop solutions in SharePoint, and you'll see some of the little dashboards I put together for people. Been with this group since it got started, and recently just jumping into the organizing it, trying to help. All right, so this is a slide I typically show site owners. So, and then at the end, I have a lot more technical details for this audience here. But typically, I sit down with site owners or a department or a group, and I might say the word agency every now and then because I work with agencies and departments. And so usually I have to introduce them to Office 365. What is an Office 365 group and a SharePoint and a team site? And typically I like to architect multiple sites. So I'll give a group a team site for their private work. They might have one communication site where they can advertise on our intranet. They might have a site for a vendor. Maybe they want the vendor to log in and upload their files. So, you know, one of the groups and departments may have one to many sites. So this is a slide I sit down and I walk them through Office 365, and I might give them a little bit more explanation on the different features of Office 365. If the group's interested in Planner, I go into it more. Basically, whenever I work with site owners, regardless of where they are, they have different sophistication levels. So I try to sit down, I gauge, and I talk to them. Basically, they're always wondering how it works, SharePoint. And I kind of tell them it's a collaboration between the IT group and them as a site owner, kind of learning how to manage their site. So I work with the site owners. Typically, I might come in and help them. They might have reached out and got help from a consultant. They might be working, there's a small Office 365 group in a couple of the agencies. It might be a web team in some of the agencies, so they might have worked with them to get their site started. Sometimes I'll come in and help them with some more advanced features or, you know, other areas of SharePoint. Let's put this on. So that end user, the site owner, typically has to either go back to IT. IT usually gives them the site. They have to order it through a catalog. They get the site. It may not come configured. They can reach out to help desk to get some help with that site. There might be other groups in that agency or the department that might help them do some configuration. And then I come in sometimes on the side. My group is the enterprise tools groups, and sometimes we come in and we help as well. So that's kind of like the makeup of how I've been working with site owners. Each agency is different, a company. So depending on how large or small your company is, you know, you might have different organization, I'm usually dealing with things at the enterprise level. So I have to kind of gauge and ask questions and who's supporting what and gauge their sophistication level, work with them. So today, the agenda, we're just going to talk through Architect. We're going to talk through mainly two sites, team site and communication sites. I'm going to do a demo in a team site. But primarily, I work with site owners on communication sites. We're trying to, right now, the initiatives to build out intranets. So we're building out a lot of intranets, and we're also building out extranets where we're having vendors come in. We're also, because we're such a large agency, we're on the government community cloud, and we have other agencies who have their own tenants. So they have to come in as a guest user into our intranet pages. So we have these sites that are intranet sites, but they also have guest users, but they're really other Commonwealth employees at other agencies. The thing we're going to talk through too is end user access. Internal members on the tenant versus external tenants. When you have an external tenant, they're either an organizational account, which means they have their own Office 365 tenant, or they have another external identity provider, and we'll give some details on that. And then access controls, how to add them to SharePoint. When you add them to a SharePoint, or do you add them to Office 365 group or an Azure group? So let me continue along. So team site, I like to put these images on the team site and the SharePoint site to kind of just remind people what a team site is and a SharePoint site. They are different, but fundamentally they're both under the hood a SharePoint site. So I try to illustrate that for my end users. You can really add users to SharePoint too. If it's a team site, you should have a good use case for it. You should stay in teams. So I kind of try to walk through some more on that. Some more detail. So here's the main difference between Teams and SharePoint. I love this slide. It's kind of concise. I can sit down and walk people through the difference of the sites. Like I said, right now we're pretty much doing communication sites with very few editors. I try to encourage the teams to be small, but I have some communication sites where there's actually a team of people working on it. So there's like 5 or 8 of them, or sometimes 10. Some communication sites are very collaborative. And typically they have a very wide audience. So end user access. Typically there's, you have your internal members, and you could decide to give access to members individually, or you could do an Azure dynamic group, or you could put, mail-enabled security groups into your site. There's many ways you can give people access to a communication site. To a team site, you still have to manage those users. The guest users, there's 2 different types of guest users. There's your external organization users. They already have a Office 365 tenant. So, a lot of our sponsors here would have their own Office 365 tenant. So we invite one of our sponsors by email. Chances are they have their own Office 365 tenant. They can accept the organizational account, and they can log in using their credentials at work. If they do not have an Office 365 tenant, I've run into even people within the Commonwealth that haven't moved to the cloud yet. They haven't migrated, they haven't got their own tenant. So then if they want to get access to our communication pages, they would have to create a Microsoft consumer account. So they go to Microsoft, create an account with Microsoft. They would give Microsoft maybe their birth date, so Microsoft can identify them. They would punch an email address in and create that account. I'm on the government community cloud, so we do not allow these other providers, but your tenants, you may turn on WeChat or Google, so somebody could go to their Facebook, log in with Facebook, and then come to your tenant if you give them access. So there's the possibility of turning those on as well for your guest users. The next thing I want to get into is access control. I'm going to go into more detail on this. So I work, as I mentioned, I work with a lot of people trying to get access to the communication site, and a lot of them are not on O365. They have their own, they have to create a Microsoft account. So I feel like I'm advertising Microsoft half the day. Like on this project right now, I'm trying to roll up these communication sites, and I'm like, oh, you got to go create a Microsoft consumer account, and this is what it gives you. And once you make that account, only then can I give you access. Now, there is, I've heard of some possibilities where you can actually create an Azure AD for your guest users, and you could actually manage their login name and password. So there are some possibilities if you get an architect to, if for some reason I had one agency that was MARSI compliant and they had to control the external user's password and login. So there are some possibilities you can do there. Okay, moving on. Access controls. Typically, the way you give a user access to a SharePoint repository or a site is, if it's a team site, be through an Office 365 group. And on the Office 365 group, it doesn't matter if they're an owner or a member, both owners and members have access to the site. Just the owners have more privilege than members. You can add users through a SharePoint group. So you can either add the user into a SharePoint group or right at the SharePoint site level. These users would have full edit or read to your site. And then you can add users to an Azure security group. If you add users, if you drop an Azure security group into your SharePoint site, you cannot drop this into a team site. You can on the SharePoint part of it, but not for chatting and communications. So Azure security groups are interesting where the owner doesn't come in and have access, so only the members of the group. So if you want the owner to also have access to the resource, you would add them as a member too. It can take some time for Azure groups, I've noticed, to work. It takes a little time, depending on the certificate. They have to log out or log in, and I noticed it just takes time for maybe some search, something to happen, because I don't know if it's using, you know, it just takes some time for the members to show up. For me, it does. So the biggest gotcha, the biggest, issue, as you can see, we're rolling out communication sites and we have internal and external audience. The biggest issue for me is that end user support. So I'm training site owners. I have one site owner that has 800 guest users in the site. And they just feel like they're becoming the IT department. So the IT department isn't quite ready to support some of the users. So they have to, get on the phone with them. Oh, you can't get to a lot of these communication sites. People to log in, they have to download drivers. Or there's a real need for them to get to these communication sites. There's documentation for the software. There's drivers. So the end users have to get there, and the end users are internal and external. So really, the site owner is taking on a lot of IT work. They're coaching the end users through how to get access, if they have an Office 365 tenant, if they do not. This is a great blog post. I did a link to it that gives you the 3 different scenarios. It's a Microsoft person who did a blog, so that's a great link to have and to go to. And it details the classic sharing. Files and folders have a slightly different link access, so different experience, and then the Azure Active Directory can have its own experience. Okay, so the experience for the end user. So you have your tenant here, and in your tenant you either have external users or internal users. Those guest users are either going to an organizational account like I mentioned, or a Microsoft account. It could be Google or all the other providers. Typically when I'm working with an end user that cannot access a site and they're running into trouble, a lot of the site owners will bring me in on the video. They'll add me to the Teams meeting, and typically what I've seen is the guest user just doesn't know how to log in to their provider first. They might have work, email in the cloud, they have Exchange, but they never logged into portal.office.com. They've never logged into the web page. They've been using Outlook desktop app, and they never got their browser working. So a lot of the time the user's browser session just is not working. Or the user is logged in on their browser to a personal account. Maybe they're logged into their son's Xbox account or something like that. So a lot of times, it's just coaching the user to log out, find out they have work or an Office account, get them to log in and get their browser session working correctly. Only then can they get to our intranet page, our communication page. So that's typically, what I see. I try to coach the site owners how to do this level of support. It can be complex for the site owners, and it can become quite a lot of work. So I also have to sit down with the site owners and kind of walk them through what happens in Azure AD. When the guest user gets added to Azure, they either get, if you go into Azure and search for the user by name or by email address, you'll see external Azure AD as their source attribute. Or if they signed in with a Microsoft account, you would see Microsoft account. Sometimes you'll see multiple, depending on your tenant. I'm in a GCC, so we don't allow people to go to the multiple. But sometimes on the source, you'll see multiple, which means the user has both a work account and a personal account tied to that one identity in your tenant. In my scenario, we have to actually convert the user or delete them. So, and depending on your tenant, you might see, invitation accepted. You might see this manage, where you can manage the invitation and resend it. I've been playing with a demo tenant. I have the demo tenant. I have my tenant and a work tenant, and I've seen different results depending on your level of access in Azure AD. Sometimes in Azure AD, you see managed B2B collaboration, and you can try to convert that person on a Microsoft consumer account over to an organization. So if they say, hey, I have a work account, but it keeps logging me in, I have to use my personal account. And so you have to actually go back to your Azure AD and fix that. You have to go and try to convert them, because they can't do it on their own, because they've been invited already, and when they've been invited, whatever they did to accept that invite, they're locked in. At least if they are in my environment. Dimitri might know more about how to get that to switch, but I've been running into trouble there. So it's a little bit about the end user, working with them, trying to work with the site owner, having the site owner understand Azure AD, what's going on with the user attribute. The other thing is the guest user who logs into your tenant, they can actually leave your tenant if they want to. So that guest user would need to log into, my account.microsoft, and they can click on organization. If you do this in your tenant, you can see any other 365 tenants you might have joined, and you can actually leave them here. I think this is one of those overlooked things where, if somebody joins my tenant and they're like, oh, I don't need to be in there anymore, and I want to stop my access. I'm like, okay, here's how you can do it yourself, but I can also do it. I can go into Azure AD and delete your profile. So we talked about Teams and SharePoint sites and the architecture. I like to do a multi-site architecture. And then I like to work with site owners and, coach them, because in the past, when they had a file share, they just put a ticket into IT and say, hey, IT, add this person to this folder. Hey, IT, add these 10 people. So now I'm coaching site owners to, you're the one in charge of managing your users and monitoring them, and then educating them. A lot of times, some people just want to deal with putting all the users in SharePoint. Some people will sit down and have a conversation with me about how can we use Azure security groups? Can we make them dynamic? Can I join Azure security groups together? And so a lot of time I like to architect some of the security up front. And that can save a lot of time for that site owner. So when I sit down with the site owners and I walk them through a couple scenarios. This communication site here, HR Life, for example, I put it on my Boston tenant. Let's imagine we have another team, this Mark A team, and they're responsible for updating the HR site. So instead of adding, all the users from this Office 365 team site, I can just add the Office 365 team site right in as a member. So all those members from a Microsoft Teams site can now manage this communication site. So you can drop in the 365 group. You can drop in Azure security groups. When you add the everyone except external users, that's actually an Azure security group. You can also drop in mailed-enabled security groups. You can drop in, you can have groups created. You can have a dynamic group dropped in. Typically, when I work with communication sites, I like to put all the users in visitors only. We limit the number of people who can make changes. And so I like to put everything in the visitors group. And then we're going to do a quick demo of the site. Now, when I demo the site, I'm going to show you a couple of things we can do. Typically, when you get a communication site, you can click on the share button and you get a box where you can type the person's name in, and then the person gets added to the owners, the visitors, or the members. You can turn this experience off if you want to. You can change the setting to make the default group be the visitors group, and then when somebody clicks the share box, they would actually get this up here that would say the site has unique permissions. So let's demo that for you. Let me just log into the right tenant. And here we go. Cool. So on our tenant here, So if you see, when you click share, I can have it come up with this experience. By default, I don't know if that went too fast on that, but that's that experience. By default, it's enabled. So if you go to site permissions, advanced permissions, and so on this site here, I added a lot more security groups. So I'm going to go over that in a minute. But benefit members is typically the group. This is make default group. So this is typically the visitors group is typically your default group. And what that means is this is how they're designed by out of the box. So when you click the share button, you now see this experience. You can open it up. You can type it in. So I like to change the default group to be the visitors group on a site where I don't want the visitors to make changes. So I'll put that one back. Advanced permissions. And the other thing, we have sites, like I said, with like 800 users. We have some sites with 800, 500, 800, and the site owners felt it was a lot of work to look through one group at all their users. So we started creating security, SharePoint security groups based on the user's domain name. So if the user was at boston.com or, Turn Digital, we would make a group and just make the group name their domain name, and then just put all the users in there, just to make it a little easier to organize the users. The other thing, when you put these groups in on group settings, you have a choice to make the group owner to make members, or you can do here on group owners. So when you make a security group, you want to think about who can make changes to the security group. So typically, you can only add one SharePoint group to be the owner of the group to make changes to it. I sit down with site owners and I talk with the site owners and I find out, do they have 2 owners, 3 owners? If they only have 2 owners, I would make all these security groups so only owners can change them. But I have some groups where there's a team of 10, 15 people managing the communication site. So then I like to drop in their team's O365 group into the members group, and I like to make all these groups members. So all the members can change the groups. So you want to think through who can make the changes. Okay. And the other thing too on a site, there's the share permission. No, let's go site settings, permissions. And change here, change how members can share. So this is always a confusing one for site owners. And so typically on the communication sites that I set up, we limit to only site owners. I can go through to those security groups and change them to members, or if they're having a large group of members also make changes, then I'll change it to owners and members. And this one here says it's only site owners can share the site. So I don't like this one typically. So I either have owners or owners and members who are sharing the site. So I either have this group or this one. That's how I have it set. This allow access. The only time people are going to see this box to ask for access if they're already internal to your agency, or if they're on your Azure AD already as a guest. So if they're already a guest on your Azure AD, then they will get this box.
Hey, Bill, we got a quick question.
Sure.
Here. Justin would like to know, what type of group is the guest group?
Is the guest what?
The guest domain groups.
Guest domain groups. Oh, on the advanced permissions? Right, so I also added in here, so I added SharePoint groups. These are all SharePoint groups. I'll make this a little bigger for people. And I also added an Azure security group. And this is a domain group. So if you add in Azure, you can also add people in. Let's say I added a person here, I thought. Yes, I added a person here. So when site owners, when I do an audit of a site, I have a site owner, they've been working with the site for a while, so I like to come in and do an audit and see what's going on, see how the site's secure and set up. And I'll always look for users that are loose here in the top level. And I like some site owners don't mind working with security groups. And so for them, I will add a security group. Typically, when I add an Azure security group, I do not add these other groups. Typically, I have to go one way or the other. I just put them both here for demonstration purposes. When I add an Azure AD group to this, I'm going to click on this. What I like to do is use PowerShell to put the group in, and then I set the description field. This actually says about me, but in PowerShell, it's called description. So I like to set the description field with the URL to the members group on AD. So that way somebody can go to Azure AD and see where that group is. So here I added an Azure AD group. This is the name of the Azure AD group. I then added this just to make it stand out. This is an Azure AD group. And then I added the URL where on our Azure AD you can actually find where that group is. So that's how I like to do it. Okay. Then the other thing, let's go back to my slides. So there's a little bit of experience about, I sit down with site owners and I figure out how they want to manage this communication site. Is it just 2 or 3 owners? Is it a group of people? Do they already have a team site? Then I can leverage that team site. I don't need to put all the users in. I can just drop the link in. Does the group, is it okay to open this communication site to everybody already on the tenant? If so, I'll put the everyone except external users. And we're in GCC, so we cannot use the everyone group. There's another group called everyone that will do all your internal members and all your guests who are currently on your Azure AD, but that does not work for us on GCC. So this is why I have to do things a little different. All right. So again, we mentioned the security groups. The biggest issue I see is doing quality assurance testing. Looking at the site, seeing how it's set up, making sure the site owner understands how it functions, and doing quality assurance testing, putting in some guest users, testing it out. For example, when I put in the Office 365 team group, I discovered that any member of this Teams group could actually go in and remove it from a communication site. So, quality assure the site, understand how things work. I also, any owner, sometimes I had owners who can click on a group up here, like click on this person. I had an owner come in here and click on a visitor by accident. They clicked on this little down arrow and they brought them to a member without knowing it. I had them take this group here and bring it from a member down to a visitor without knowing it. They were just clicking and they actually didn't, they clicked and did a slide and didn't notice they did it. So this is why I usually like to add these. I like to turn off this experience. So when it's a communication site, I like to go and set the visitors group as the default. When I do that, it turns off this experience and it turns off the likelihood of them accidentally clicking on these and changing, unexpectedly making changes. Okay. Then if somebody already has a team site, I'll actually set up directions for them. Like so here, let me demo this site. So this Mark 8 group, like I mentioned earlier, they're responsible. Let's say they're responsible for the HR communication site. And they're a large group. Somebody new comes into the group. Hey, we want you to manage the HR site. So I'll set up directions for them on their team site. And, I give them the link to their communication site. I tell them to add users to add users to security groups. And we already pre-provisioned the security groups. Like we went in and used PowerShell and we just created a bunch of security groups. I had one site with 50 security groups in SharePoint, all by domain name. And then they just have to go in and add the new users to the group. The biggest issue is just training site owners how to monitor the access requests. Go in, keep an eye on those access requests. If I open this in a new tab and show you the access request for the site. So here on the access request, this Alex Wilbur, he's somebody that I only shared a file with him. I didn't share the site. So I went into the file sharing experience. I shared one file. And then Alex went in and said, hey, can I get access to the site? And this is the request from Alex. I really don't like this experience where you can't hover over this and see who it is. I can't tell if this is an internal member or an external member. And when you click the 3 dots, I can see the default, like I mentioned earlier, is the visitors group. So when somebody requests access and fills out that form, they're going to be pre-populated with the group that you select, that you make the default. Because I made more groups, I can actually change the group and say, oh, he actually belongs over here. You know, it's hard because I can't see this user's domain name, so it's hard for me to tell when they request access. But then I can change the group and then click approve. So I could actually change the group before I approve the user. It's funny how they show up on pending requests. Now, so yeah, these are the pending. So here are requests that I've sent out, but the user has not accepted the invite yet. And you can see this person was added to the visitors group. This one I added to the Microsoft security group. And what you can do is you can remind these users by clicking the three dots. You can resend an invite to them, withdraw the invite. You can also change the security group. So that's why I kind of like security groups. When you have a large number of people on the site, it gives you the chance to fix it. I have one group that literally has about 14 pages. They have a list about, I think the list is 30 or 40 names long, and there's about 45 pages because they just send a lot out. So I really recommend doing a handful of invites and keeping it manageable, and then just withdrawing the invite if you need to, but it's a hard call. So that's why I try to work with the site owner and let it be their call. Okay, so going back to the management page.
Bill, quick question for you.
Yep.
Julie was asking, if you click on that name, will it take you to their Dell?
Oh, to their Azure AD? Yeah, I don't think it does. It just brings you to the profile on SharePoint. So this will bring you to the SharePoint profile. If you want to see their Azure AD, you just have to copy their name and go to your Azure AD. You know what I mean? And look them up. And then on your Azure AD, you can see the user. And then when you look at the user, you can see, then you can see the source. Are they internal, external? You can see what's going on with the user. Okay. And then, all right, so I mentioned earlier, I sit down with the users. Usually, if I get the chance to meet the site owner before they order the site, I'll talk through the security of the site. A couple things I talk through is, do you want to have guest users? Usually, I work with communication sites, so the answer is yes. If it's a private team site, it's no. Existing only people in your organization. So these are the two big ones. The other thing that really gets overlooked is the link setting, this default link setting on sites. I like it to be people with existing access because, again, I work with a lot of communication sites and even private team sites. I like to leave this always set to people with this existing access. And here's the reason why. If I click here. So on the back end, on any SharePoint site, you can actually change the setting. You can turn off the organizational level. And you can, so any site owner can request to have these links changed if you don't want the default. So I always recommend site owners to actually go and try to share a file or folder and see what your default is. Is it set to link? Is it set to specific people? And then have it changed to people with this existing access. If you have a large group of people, like if you have a bunch of members, but if it's only 2 owners, you could train the owner. But even me, I make mistakes and just click the share button. So I like to, even for myself, when there's only 1 owner, I like to change this setting. And let me show you, we'll explain why in a second. So here's sharing files and folders. So I'm gonna take this file and I'm gonna just click the share button because it looks so easy. You click that. Typically I recommend you copy a link, you email it to them, but you click this share link and then it's on specific people. So you type somebody in, it says Alex is outside your organization. It doesn't tell you he doesn't have access to the site currently. It doesn't give you an option to add him to the site. So you send a link out to Alex. And then if Alex will get access to the file, and you could go, you know how you go to advanced permissions, you click check permissions. I can show that to you. Let's go back here. So you're in a site, you can go site permissions. Let's go back to the beginning. How am I doing on time? Site permissions. And then advanced permissions. And then check permission. So you can do check permission, type Alex Wilbur.
You got about 30 minutes, Bill.
Oh, good. So Alex, we only gave him access to a file, one file. And when you do check permission, you can see it says web only, limited, and it just says access. It doesn't tell you what he has access to. So check permission isn't great. And then I use, to audit the site, I use JSON code. So I do JSON to kind of audit what's going on. This is the output of a JSON code. I did the JSON API against the site. I'm going to demo that. But here I can see Alex is in the site. I can see, Alex has a link that's been shared to this document. Now, again, this is the document that I mentioned over here. I took this document and I shared it. Okay, and then on the back end, we did check permission. This is what it looks like. And if I do the API code, I can see that what Microsoft does is it creates a special link share. And all that is a SharePoint group that's been hidden. So it's basically just like all those groups I created. It's a hidden SharePoint group with a long grid. They put in on the description field this long text and then the name of the file. They also have to give person access to the web and to the site. So that's what these other groups up here. Limited access group for lists. So a document library is really considered a list. So they have to give them custom access to the document library and then custom access to the web. Okay, so that's how Microsoft does that.
Quick question, Bill.
Yep.
Brian in chat is asking if you could please describe the Outlook button and its function on the send link panel.
Oh yeah, so that just basically takes the link and just opens up your Outlook. So I believe so you can send it, right, Mike?
That's correct.
I don't think it gives permission or anything. Yeah, I think it might give permission then do it. I think it still makes the link share, so it'll still do the work. It's just that you get the option to customize the email. But it still does the same background work on the site. Now, this user here, like I said, I shared the file with them. The user only has this file shared with them, so they can go to HR Life Shared Documents, and they can see the file they have. You can run into problems when you start sharing a lot of subfolders. So I usually train site owners to only share the first level of folder. And I even have one site where they decided to do a migration, where they actually migrated their file shares up to a SharePoint site. And they actually named the SharePoint site the same name the file server used to be. And then they made a document library for the different groups. And in that way, the group kind of just had to know to go to the site that was the name of their old file share, and they had to go to the folder, and they knew the folder name, and they could see their files. But you need to know the URL to get at the files if you're doing folder sharing. It can work if you did it from a communication site, but usually I recommend having another communication site where you list all the links, because they don't have access. So that is an approach I've seen, but, I like multiple SharePoint sites. But if you did want to just throw them all into one, maybe you could do multiple libraries. So there's options out there. Just let it be known that if the user can't get to the site, when they go to the site, they'll get this box asking them, they can ask for access. And then when you go onto your back end access request, you'll see that user come in. Again, you can't really tell the user's email and who are they. Okay. So even today, I shared this PowerPoint with Dimitri and Mike, and on our Office 365 tenant, the default was set to anybody with a link. And without even thinking of it, I clicked the share button, I typed in the email addresses, and on the back end, it created the sharing link. And even though Mike and Dimitri both have access to the site, it went and did it. You know what I mean? So really something to keep an eye out on. All right, so code here. How do I get this code? The way I got this code is through an API. So I use a SharePoint API. And I go to whatever your site name is, _API web, and then I go to the site groups. So on site groups up here, if you look at the architecture for SharePoint, they have groups and users, and then they have another set of tables over here for the roles, definitions, and rights on the back end. But basically what I'm doing is I'm going to the groups table, all those groups I showed you, and I'm expanding the many-to-many, the connection to the users, so the one-to-one connection. So up here, I'm doing site groups. I'm selecting title from site groups. I'm selecting description from it. And then I'm expanding into this users list, this other list over here. And on user list, I'm saying user list / title. So I'm doing a selection of the title in the user list. Then I'm saying user list / email. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is I'm selecting title and description from the groups, and I'm selecting title and email from the users list. And that's this link here. So if I show that to you. So I use this plugin. This plugin is called SP REST JSON. And this is the plugin I use, and you have to turn it on, and then you have to change the response headers. So I like to change the response headers to no metadata, and that cleans it up. And this is how I can do a quick audit on a site. I can look at all the security groups quickly. I can see there's no description, so that way I know there's no link share. If you do see a description, that's a link share. So limited access, we talked about that. And then down here, here's a sharing link. And this group is flexible sharing. And this is that file I mentioned that we shared with the individual. Okay. Really, SP REST JSON, I think this plugin is a godsend. I like this plugin a lot. You can even take away everything at the end and just go to API / web. And then you would go back to your plugin and do verbose. And then here you can see all the commands that are available through the API. And like I said, we were doing site group. And here's the link for site group. We did users, site users. And here's site users. So you can actually see what the URL is. So all you need to know is API / web, and you can kind of get started if you have this plugin. This plugin makes it easier because without this plugin, you just get all this blob of text. So the SP REST JSON plugin really allows you to work through and see what's going on. Again, I like to change the headers. I like to change to no metadata. Okay. All right. So that's that one. You can also do it the other way around. So here I'm doing site groups and I'm expanding into users. I actually like to do it this way. I like to do site users and expand into groups. So when you do it the other way, you get everybody stacked together. So here's Alex Wilbur that we only share the file with. And so you can see the file here that was shared, and you can see the web access and the list access. Okay. Where I found all this out. Now, it's a little confusing. Microsoft calls site users up here for users. But when you do an expand command, you expand into users. So whenever you do an expand command, you expand into the name you see here. But to get it to work, you have to look on the API and find out what the name is called. It's not called the same as the architecture. So I had to know site users, and then I expand into groups. If I go back, I had to know it's called site groups, and I expand into users. So it's a little tricky where the names don't quite match. Okay, and this is the page where I found this information out. This is a page on Microsoft. And the other thing I want to mention is, I don't know if you've been in the advanced permissions. You go into permissions, and you can actually edit, full control, design, edit, and read. Microsoft's sharing abilities. I had one vendor I had a communication site set up for a vendor, and the requirement was the vendor needed to go in and share with other guest users. So the vendor was a guest, and he had to go in and share with other members. So we wanted to tweak okay, the vendor can do this, but we're gonna make sure they can't delete. So we're trying to be smart. So I went in and I copied the edit permission table, and I turned off delete and played with it a bit. But the minute I did that, we broke the vendor can share with the person. Now, your admin can also turn off a feature called guest can share with guests. So it depends on if that background setting is on. But I can override that setting if I give the vendor full control to the document library. So if I put the vendor into full control, the vendor could still share with guests, even though the tenant setting says they can't. The key is I can no longer do best practice and make a copy of these permission levels. Because you make a copy of the permissions level, they actually have a different grid behind them. Microsoft ties their sharing and access requests and controls to these access levels. So if you do want to tweak something, you can make a copy as a backup, maybe call it backup, but edit them in place. No longer do I recommend making a copy and working with the copy for those people who get into this more advanced area. All right, the other way you can do auditing on the site is PowerShell. PNP PowerShell is really good. You can connect to PNP PowerShell, put your full URL in. I just did the shot of URL here. And this is the easiest command where you can just, oops, oh, where'd it go? Just with rights assign details. And then you can run it against your site and quickly see who's in what group. So I first started just doing this before I found the API command. I could just run this command, copy, paste it, and mail it to a site owner so they can see who's in their site. So there's the PowerShell. The other thing I mentioned was security groups, Azure security groups. So if you don't want to add users to SharePoint and do all this crazy work that we're doing, you can architect everything through Azure security groups. I actually like dynamic groups. You can actually create a dynamic group based on an external user's domain name. So if you work with a vendor and you don't mind anybody at that vendor's domain name would have access, you could actually set up a dynamic group to look at, are they a guest user? And you could look at the user principal name and just put them into an Azure security group. So that is possible. You can do is if you decide to use Azure security groups is you can combine from that. If you add one Azure security group to a site, like a communication site, you can then add in people, but you can also add in other Azure security groups. The only downside is you cannot add in Office 365 groups. You cannot mix and match. So you have to stay with Azure security groups. And then we'll do one more, and then let me do one more demo of the site. And so I mentioned this control panel, the site I like to give people. Like this team site is responsible for it. I like to use Power Automate. Let me show you a Power Automate list. Let's make this. So here's a custom list. So what I'm using is I'm using JSON to go out to the list that I showed you earlier, and I'm pulling back all the groups, and I'm pulling back the number of users in each group, and then I'm pulling back who the owner is. Is this group owned by owners or members? So when you toggle some of the settings, this way you can just, the owner can keep an eye on the site. You can see these three groups change to owners, but these change to members. So if you say only owners can share the site, it actually goes in and I believe it changed the permission of the group. And here's limited access group, where you normally wouldn't be able to see these groups. And so now I put a link back to this group. So users can actually go into limited access and go to the site and see the users that could not see before because it was hidden. So here's Alex Webb. So if I wanted to remove Alex from the file, and if I wanted to actually delete this limited access group, I can do that now. I can go in here to group settings and delete it. So because I have this list with links back to everything, I can actually clean this site up. I can take him out. I can take out these two limited access, and then I can give him access to the site. And this is great for site owners to kind of see that they've been adding sharing links. Maybe they have a new employee who wasn't trained to add the user to the site, and they've just been sharing files and folders. So this is a great way of auditing the site. And let me show you, so I made this list, and if you go to list settings, so I'll show you how I like to organize things. So under list settings, I like to put right in here how I'm going about making this list happen. I use JSON code. I'll pull this up so I can show you. So in this list, I'm actually saying I use JSON code. I'm using the website groups. And then what I need to do in order to update the list, I got to find out, is that person already on the list? Because I have to do an add or an update. So what I do is I query the custom list I just showed you to see if the user is already there. So I do a query on the list based on the ID, and if they're there or not, I make a decision. The user count, I'm going out and I'm doing this API to get the count of users. So I'm going into each group and I'm counting the users. Now here's the Power Automate script I made. So right in this list, this list is being maintained by a Power Automate flow. So I like to put the link right to Power Automate so that the site owner can see that it's tied to something. And then you can click on Power Automate and you can see the flow I created. And let me do an edit on the flow. So this is the Power Automate flow I have. It runs right now every 15 minutes, which I can now change to daily. Once daily. I'm just setting some variables, so I need to get the groups to put on the list. So I just set an array for groups. And users is just a string, because I just want to get the count of users. So I just need to store that as a string. And this is a very powerful flow command. Let me make this bigger. So this is where you just go out to your SharePoint site. I'm doing a get. I'm doing that API web site groups that I mentioned. So this is to go out and just get all the site groups. And then here on variables, I'm just setting a groups variable. So I already had initialized the group variable up here. I initialized the variable as an array, but it's empty. I went out here and I got all the site groups. And now I'm setting the site groups with the results. This is a little tricky to get this in here. There's some directions out there, but you have to do like D results. So this is a little tricky. Okay, I then like to parse the site groups into JSON. To me, it just makes it easier. So I just take the groups and I run through JSON. What I had to do up here, I like to put notes in here. Whenever I have to do something tricky, this command here, like I mentioned earlier, like the groups, you have to do D results. This is what I actually typed in. I typed in body, site request, D, column results. This changes where you can't see that anymore. You can kind of see it if you hover over it. On this one here, description, I had to change. Description was typed string. Sometimes description can be null, and sometimes description can have data in it. So in order to get this flow to work, what I had to do is I had to query site groups. Let me see, I probably did it up here. Here we go. So I had to query site groups for description being greater than blank. So I had to make sure I came back first with positive data in my description field. Okay, so once I got positive data in my description field, I did not get any nulls. Then I had to, go down here, and I had to make sure description type equals string. So then I could actually get my description, and I could drop that on my SharePoint list. Okay, and let me explain that to you down here further. So down here, we're on a list. Here we go, conditions. I'll go over this in a minute, but this description field, I could not put it in there. For the life of me, I couldn't find it. It wasn't available to me. So what I had to do was I had to get all the site groups that had positive descriptions first. Then, only then, could I see description here. Then once I saw description, I could put it in, and then I could put things back the way I wanted them to be. So then up here, I can, then I changed description to be, let me make this bigger. Then I could change description to be null and also string, because I have null and string come back. So Power Automate doesn't handle null and strings well. So after, then once I change this back to null and string, I could take my query and I could take off the, only give me positive descriptions. I could take that off and go back to just site groups. Okay, so that was a little tricky. Like I had to do the flow twice, do it once with descriptions and then do it again the way it's supposed to be. All right, let me just show you a little bit more of this Power Automate now that we went over the gotchas, the problems in it. So from a high level, yeah, we're going out, we're setting the variables, we're going out and getting all the site groups. We're setting the groups to the groups that came back to an array, with parsing them through JSON, and then I'm also getting the count of users. So I do there is I get list by title. Oh, this is just checking to see if the list is available. Okay, let's see. This might be a little much, but Okay, now I'm just checking the group. So here I check the custom list because I'm on the team site now. I check the list to see if it's available. There's the list item there. Okay, and then this is my get user count. Here I'm going back. It's probably not in the right order, but I'm going back and I'm getting the count of users from site groups. So I'm going to site groups and I'm looking up an individual group and I'm getting the count of users. Okay, so here I check the custom list. I have a condition. The condition I like to do this a lot. I do first because there's an array that comes back. And you know, whenever you work with Flow and you have an array, I like to do the for each statement. And so you get into trouble whenever you play with arrays. But if you just want to get the first item off of an array, I do the first body check group. And that's how I get the first item from an array to use it as a condition to see if this list item is actually here or not. And so that's basically how I do my condition, decide, do I want to update the list or do I want to create a list item? So,
quick question for you, Bill.
Yep.
Christine would like to know if this flow requires a license.
You need to have Flow in your environment. So, you know, if you go to your waffle and if you see Power Automate, then you're good to go. You have to be a site owner to get the Flow to work. So there's two requirements. You have to, you know, have Power Automate available to you, and then you have to be a site owner so that you can use those APIs. Because only the site owner can use the APIs.
And just another question there. When you say site owner, is it just a site owner or the collection owner?
Thank you. Good correction. Site collection owner, correct. I believe it's site collection owner.
We had a debate going on about that here in the chat.
Yes, it's site collection owner, correct. Yep, and you learn by QAing them. I mean, you can see, you know, we do an awful lot of QAing where I am just to test everything. So that's the Power Automate. Just to go back to the list, so let's go back here. Let's leave this. And this again, you know, the description, I like to write in the custom list. I like to actually update my list name, title, and description. I like to put in all the tidbits for people to find everything. I love tying things together. You know, especially if I have a developer, I'm like, this is how I want it done. I want, you know, I want it all tied together so I can find it. Because who knows, it's going to be 2 years every time I come back to this group and help them for the next thing. So, and then to go back to the list, and again, here's the list. And then what you can do is you can actually filter this list, and you can filter it so you don't see limited access, and you can filter out the members groups, and you can actually get it so you can have a sum that actually equals the guest users. I have one site where I worked with them on some filtering, and I got this number right down to the number of guest users they have if they did not put them into multiple groups. So, and then that's where auditing comes in. So I have some site owners who actually put the SP REST JSON on their computer. Now the other thing you do is you can make Excel. We showed you these API commands that go out to the REST and get the data. We showed you Power Automate that you can go out and get the data and bring it to a list. You can do the same exact thing from Excel. Let me open up this Excel file. And it does not work on the web version. The web version will not do a refresh, so I get these error messages. You have to open in Desktop App. So open in Desktop App. I have to log in. Okay, oh, there we go. Okay, so this is a custom list. This is an Excel file, sorry. And cool. And if you go to data and refresh all data, you should be able to see the data come in. And up here under data, there's queries and connections. So let's show this to you. So in queries and connections, here's the groups query. So if I double click on the groups query, and just like in Power, I don't know if anybody does Power BI, but just like in Power BI, you have a transform data. By double clicking on this, you're transforming the data. And then here, there's a source. If I double click on source, you can actually see the command. I'm going out and I'm getting that API web site groups. Okay. So I have this API here that goes out and gets site groups. I have this one here that goes out and gets site users. And then I even have one, the access request list. That's actually a custom list. So I have a query that goes out to the access request list. Say that a couple of times. So the query here is, HR Life. I'm going to lists, get list by title. I'm getting the access request list. I'm getting /items. And then I'm doing a select. Select equals request for display name. And I have a long statement here that goes down. And actually, I will put that into the chat. And that's the old data feed that I'm doing. And I'm getting the access request lists. And let's close down the transformation. And then on this list, what I'm doing is I can do VLOOKUPs onto other lists here. So the groups over here, for example, I'm getting the name of the group by doing a VLOOKUP based on I2, so based on the permission level ID. So it gives a unique ID to each security group. So I'm going to the site groups list here, looking up the ID group, pulling the name over. Go ahead.
Can you zoom in on that for us, Bill?
Yep, let me make this bigger.
Thank you.
And close that down. And so, yeah, I'm just doing a VLOOKUP to I column, to this number. So I'm just getting this number here, and I'm going over to the groups list, which is another list, and I'm just pulling up the group name. So on this, access request list, I'm pulling in the group name, pulling in its status, pending, accept, pending. So this gives in Excel the site owner a very quick way to get at all the data. Here's all the people who got approved, here's all the people that are pending. They could take this and do another mass mailing to them. Like I said, we have some sites that have 800 users. So they can grab the email addresses quickly and send it out. So that's the another list I have for auditing. Like there isn't enough ways of auditing. And again, this is trial and error. I'm trying to figure out what works for different groups. Some people like the Excel file. Some people like the API call. So right here, I put the API call on their site, and I put directions how to get, and make this bigger. And scroll down. Why can't I scroll to the left? So I put directions right here to Firefox, Chrome, and Edge, how to get that plugin. And this is the plugin, like I mentioned, I liked earlier, that shows, the user. Like here's Alex Webb. And again, you need this SP REST JSON, and you need to change it to no metadata, makes it look better. Okay, so back to the slides. This is the dynamic groups I mentioned earlier. You can even nest different groups. Really, I think, communication sites, we didn't really go through and get our Active Directory cleaned up yet and all the attributes and different groups. But typically, if you're doing communication sites, you would probably have the architecture in place first. We're right now working with a lot of communication sites where people have, like I said, these custom-built software, and they have customers. So they're just trying to engage their customers. So even if we had the architecture, chances are that customers wouldn't be in that ecosystem. Office 365 groups, I threw the slide at the end. You can add guest users to Office 365, like team sites, Office 365 groups. I don't know if this has changed. This slide's kind of old, but this is kind of what you can do with what the user, a guest user in a 365 group has access to. And so typically, site governance, a lot of this stuff would have been covered by site governance. If you had governance planning, you would go through and review all these settings. And, we're so large that I think a smaller company might be able to have templates and have things configured. Or we're just not there yet. SharePoint, there's the best practices. I'm still trying to figure that out. Is it SharePoint? Is it Azure groups? All I can say is really verify your sharing options, look at help configure the site, and test and monitor it regularly. That's test and QA it, try to train the site owners. That's kind of my presentation. I can do ad hoc questions and do some other demos things. People want to see anything else? We can open the floor up.
Actually, if you want to check, Robert just posted a question in the chat.
So like Robert asked the question about, extranets and getting those users in there. It just comes to, it's not an easy extranet. I guess that's the reason why we kind of like did this presentation. I just felt it wasn't an easy extranet. We had a lot of the sites I'm working with are on the VPN. Like you get VPN, and then we had a web server set up, and now people are working from home, and we're trying to get rid of the VPN requirement. But now we're going to an authenticated user. They have to authenticate. So that biggest issue is just getting that user to authenticate with their identity they're coming in with, and that to me is a huge support issue. I just don't see any way around it. You know what I mean? I have heard of companies coming in and doing. Oh, where was the slide? I have heard of companies coming in and actually managing the guest user with an Azure AD container, but then you're taking ownership of both sides. You're always taking ownership of your internal users, but then you would have another container for your guest users where you're now you have to develop maybe a way for them to reset their password, or you're redeveloping what Microsoft's doing, basically. But there are, vendors out there, I'm sure that could help with that. But it's just some, time, energy, and money. And let's see. Any other questions I sent out to you, Mike? Oh, there, I can help. My glasses on, that'll help. Like, wait a minute, I can't read. Right, so you can ask your guest users to use MFA. Yeah, we have that too. So they get a code, they get a number. So when our guest users log in, they actually get that that code, and that's kind of typical. I don't know if you added, Deb, if you added anything else beyond that, but we're in the GCC, so we have those on automatically for the MFA.
Yeah, so Bill, we have it goes out. We have an email. Actually, we have a whole script that I send out to people ahead of time, our guest users ahead of time, showing them exactly what to expect. Because many of our collaborators are older and they're just not that technically savvy. So we give them a step-by-step how to sign on with the MFA and to set up, their phone that way.
Yeah, and then are they using a Microsoft account? Or are they using?
Some are, some are not. Some of them are Gmail or Yahoo or AOL accounts, which means we have to open that up in our domain, which we're not happy about, but that's what we have to do.
Yeah, so trying to get it in. I mean, maybe an extranet works better when you can open up these other providers. But yeah, it's just not easy. That's what we're finding, and I'm feeling for the site owners because it's just a lot of work.
It is, at this point, because we've been doing this for about a year and a half almost, because I think I talked about this in the summer of 2019. I asked people about external collaboration because we were trying to set it up at the time. And now we've got a big mess to clean up. We got to go through all the guest accounts where we've got contracts that no longer are valid. And so therefore they shouldn't have access to our portal. Some collaborations are just, they're just done. People have left the companies and they're not logging in anymore. Some people never logged in. They got an invitation and never logged in.
Yeah, like I said, I have one site that has literally 20 pages worth of people that never logged in. They're just sitting there. And that's why I made that Excel file to kind of pull that data back for that site owner to go through easily and peruse and maybe send some emails out to, hey, do you need help logging in? I see you never logged in. Do you need help? So they're using that Excel file to look at the pending, to send that email communication quickly, and then the people who email them back. So they're working with the people that are willing to communicate with them. So that's how they've been whittling it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I set up a work instruction. I actually have an MSP help desk behind me. So I set up a work instruction. The ticket goes to them. They follow that work instruction. And they have a script that they copy and paste into an email that they send off to the client, letting them know what the link is to the SharePoint site. But the other thing that we've done as well is we have, rather than setting up a whole entire SharePoint, what we've done is we isolate. So we have a group of people working together in an externally facing SharePoint site with EXT in the URL. We got a different coloring, different branding, and it's not hooked up to a hub. It's also a team site that's not connected to groups. So we really are trying to isolate our content. We don't want our content to leave the domain of SharePoint. But in some cases, all they need to do is share content and they're not collaborating. And so we're using a product called Go Anywhere so that it's more the file share experience, because for some cases they just need a quick file share. So we're actually using that product for that.
Okay. Yep.
And keeping SharePoint for collaboration, co-authoring, things like that.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, it's a fascinating ride trying to help the users in. You know, it's just that's the gotcha. It's becoming a lot of admin work. It's like it feels like it's being moved to that site owner, but at the end of the day, you know, they're managing that site and they're trying to get their users in there. So, you know, having the ones that take on this work is really working well. There are, you know, you can add users to Azure security groups. One of the things I want to mention about that is there can be a delay when you add a user to an Azure security group. I think there's a delay for SharePoint just to be aware of the group, and then there's a delay depending on the user session. Sometimes they have to log out and log in again. I've seen some users log out and log in again still. Like if I just add them to the site, they still don't have access for a little bit. So there's some time delays there. SharePoint group is you're on the phone with somebody, you add them to your SharePoint site, it's instantaneous. If you're an Office 365 team site, you add somebody, I see that as instantaneous when I've been doing the testing and working with guest users. But when I do the Azure security group architecture, I notice there's more of a delay. So that's something you set it up ahead of time and then wait to communicate with your users. So that's some of the things I've noticed depending on the architecture of the site. Like I said, I have sites with different architectures, so it gets kind of tricky, you know. Yeah, any other questions?
Bill, Christine would like to know if you know of any best practices for enabling of external users.
There's that documentation where it's, would I do it? I put this on the wrong page. Here we go. Yes, we had that Mike made a nice link for us for the guest users. Where'd that go? Yeah, so this is the link here that we put to it. I mean, it's a blog post by a Microsoft employee. It's a couple of years old, but they just go through it. Best practices. The experience is always changing on SharePoint. I mean, is it best practices from the SharePoint side or from the guest user side? Let's see.
I think it's best practices from an architecture side is what she was asking.
Yeah, I mean, I like Azure
from a
security
policy
groups.
standpoint.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Best practices from the architecture point, because, like, for example, there could be situations that one could be created your own profile on the tenant, so then that's how you're enabled access, or just a matter of enabling access through your own specific profile, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the sophistication level of the agency or the department or the company. You know, is your AD cleaned? Is it ready? You know, it really depends. Do you have a vendor helping you? You know, right now, you know, I'm just working with site owners who are trying to stay inside our SharePoint sites. But yeah, I think it's kind of hard to. Mike, do you have any input on that?
It's difficult. So, you know, it's definitely one of those things where it varies from client to client that I've worked with. I have some general concepts that I like to kind of throw out there. If for no other reason, I find having a starting point acts as a good straw man for people to kind of poke holes at. And frequently they do, and they end up looking nothing like what we started with. And some clients have literally gone the exact opposite direction of some of the other clients that we've ended up setting up. So it really depends on, you know, what kinds of classifications you have, what regulatory concerns you have, you know, whether or not you need external users to be able to access restricted data or not. You know, I've worked with healthcare clients where they needed to allow external people to be able to access healthcare data.
Yeah, and then like healthcare, I worked with one agency that was healthcare related. They, you know, they had MARSI compliance, so they couldn't have a guest user unless their password was changed every 30 days. So that means they have to manage both sides of it. So you know, I recommend it for them, like maybe an Azure AD container, but you know, we had a vendor lined up, but then I think it kind of like got pushed down the road a little bit further. So I'm hoping to see how that project comes out. You know.
Yes. So Robert is just asking the question. To my understanding, SharePoint is not designed to be external facing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's an authentication
But
system.
isn't really designed to have an external facing SharePoint site. Is that your experience?
That's hard to say.
Well, I would say it's not. I would say that it's not designed to be external facing. It's not designed to be a public site. And the big difference there is anonymity. Yeah, what Russell just said. Yeah, there's a big difference between external facing and public.
Well, that's what, Power Apps portal's for, right? So you can have something anonymous or, yeah.
Right, exactly. In fact, Bill, you just took the words out of my mouth. I was actually going to say the Power App, Power Platform portals is positioning Microsoft back into the domain. No pun intended there.
Right. Yeah.
The public-facing site.
I mean, I was excited when Office 365 came out and you could have that anonymous SharePoint page, and we had our user group's website on that, and then they took away that feature, and then I was like, uh-oh, they're not doing anything public related. Now the Power Apps portal looks really promising.
I do just want to chime in that the Power Apps portal is great, but you are also paying for licensing based on how many anonymous visitors versus logged in visitors you have. So it's not an all-you-can-eat type of hosting platform.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. But an application, there could be cost benefits for that if it's
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
exactly. It's all a matter of, like with anything, they're all tools, and with any tools, it's just a matter of leveraging the tools for the correct purpose. Again, you have to go back to that adage of could versus should.
Yeah.
yes. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, Bill. That was awesome. We need to move to some upcoming community events. After we go through events and then do a quick raffle, we'll actually open up to another Q&A and kind of a cyber mingle afterwards. So if anybody has any follow-up questions or any questions that they didn't get to, or maybe didn't want to ask while being recorded, that would be the place for that. So, without any further ado, upcoming community events. We do not have a lot of these, and that may just be because there were so many messages going on in chat that I didn't catch anybody else, but Microsoft Ignite is coming up. That's running on March 2nd through 4th. And for those of you that are not aware, it is 100% online and it is completely free this year. So hop on, register,
Nice.
go join it. It's I'll be attending for the first time this year, and I'm very excited. I'm told it's a wonderful event. There's also the Women IT Pros monthly call. You can learn more about that at their website. And other than that, is there anything else that anybody knows about?
Hey, Mike, I just posted the link for at the end of March is SharePoint's 20th birthday event on the 27th of March.
20th birthday?
Yep, SharePoint is 20 years old.
Dig up the flying monkeys?
Wow.
Now I feel old.
Yeah. That's depressing. All right. Anything else?
And I just posted another link from pretty much the M365 crew, like Joel, oh God, brain freeze. Ryan, Galen, and also so forth. it's actually tomorrow, so it's not too late to register, is the M365 Career Fair. You could also find it on the SVS event site, but I posted the link.
Okay. Oh, and the Scottish Summit is also coming up.
Yes.
That's on February 27th.
Can I travel for that one?
It's free. It's online, and there's an app you can download for it.
And Rachel's going to be presenting.
I still need to
Yay.
record my session. I got my hair done today, so I can record my session.
All right.
Ooh, wave it, Rachel.
Important stuff.
Awesome, awesome.
Also
All right.
Also coming up in mid-March is Dynamics Con. So there may or may not be Dynamics people in the group, but there may be Power Platform people, you know, like Flow, Apps, Power BI. So that's all bundled into Dynamics Con. So, and that's also free and virtual. The link's there.
Nice. All right. Does this group still exist? Or was I
Yes,
supposed
it
to take
does.
this spot?
They just met last night, I believe.
Awesome. All right. Well, first Tuesday, if they met last night, then first Tuesday of every month probably isn't correct. So we'll update that. But anyway, there's a Rhode Island user group hosted by DRC Hess. Check out their meetup page and go see when they're meeting. There's also the Hartford Office 365 User Group hosted by Jared Matfis. And that's on the last Wednesday or Thursday of every month. And the Granite State User Group is on the first Thursday of every month. And that's with Julie Turner and Jim Wilcox. Check out their meetup site.
And actually, Mike, with the New Hampshire user group, I believe they're looking for more speakers. And I think the host there, I think Julie has stepped down. Derek Cash Peterson is one of the hosts.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I will update the slide accordingly.
Yeah. Or actually, just ping Derek just to make sure. But I believe that's my understanding.
All right. I'll check that out. And then, of course, there are many, many other groups. Anybody else know of any groups coming up? Anyone? Bueller?
Yeah. I'll have to update this. We'll put some of the monthly PNP groups and everything on here. We should probably put some of that, the dev stuff on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So next month is me. I'll be
Yay.
presenting Metadata is Not Dead. So that'll be my my rescheduling of what was meant to be the January session. We'll be doing that on March 18th.
There are moments, Mike, I wonder.
Oh, it's not. It's certainly not. I've been doing tons of it with it lately. So good stuff.
I love my metadata, Mike. If you could help me come up with reasons to get my end users to use it, that's where I really struggle. I love my
Sure.
metadata. Can't convince my end users.
All right. We'll go over it. We'll go over not only why they should use it, but I'll show you a bunch of sneaky ways to get them to accidentally enter it without knowing that they entered it. Very sneaky.
As a librarian, this is true and dear to my heart. Metadata is certainly not dead. It's the crux of all information. And Deb, if you don't already follow Louise Fries on Twitter, definitely give her a follow. She has a great instruction for the typical end user of explaining metadata.
Oh, I explain it to them till I'm blue in the face, and then we gotta plug it in, and they're never convinced. But it's all that stuff is great. Thank you.
All right. Well, send them
And
to
sweet
next
is funny.
month's session, and
Yeah, right.
we'll tell them what's for.
I'll try to get our EAs to attend. Yep.
All right. So we did a little bit of this at the beginning, but anybody having any problems or tips or any wonderful things that they've discovered or learned?
Ooh, forms.
Ooh, forms.
Sorry, I didn't realize that my mic was on. Yeah, there's actually an update I saw today about forms, about groups and forms. I don't remember the details though. Check your portal.
I will do that. Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody?
Just like to say in Power Automate, naming your boxes in a way that they're not the same. So when you do the picking of the data from each step, you can get confused if you don't do it properly.
Yes.
Right? I ran into that.
I could do a whole session on various glitches that I've discovered in Dataverse for Teams, because I've been living in that for the past 2 weeks.
That would make an interesting session.
Yeah, it would just be a session of me screaming into the microphone right now, but maybe in a few months I could do that. After I get something to actually work in there. But right now there's a lot of things that Microsoft recreated in there that look very much the same as Power Apps that is outside of the Dataverse, but don't have all of the same fields and don't have all of the same functionality. So, yeah, it's remarkably similar, but just different enough to drive you mad. So, that's where I've been living. Anybody else? No? Office 365 has been absolutely perfect for everybody? That's amazing. Weird. All right. On to the next slide.
So, so Mike, just before you move on,
Yeah.
I think we also have the lower part of that slide.
Whoops. It didn't go back. Yes. Oh, yeah. Anybody hiring? Anybody looking to get hired? Anybody? Bueller? Bueller?
Posts.
Well, mine doesn't apply really to Office 365, but if anybody knows any good cloud architects, a position's probably going to be coming up for CNC software in the next quarter.
But you're my go-to cloud architect.
I'm not doing what they're doing. They're rebuilding everything in Azure. I'm going to stay in my little M365 side of everything.
Yeah, so Wellington Street is actually probably looking to hire very soon. We're going to be looking for a SharePoint or Power Platform engineer. We're starting to get a lot of work in that space and getting very overwhelmed. So if anybody knows anybody with that skill set looking for a place to go, please send them my contact info.
Hey, Mike, someone in the chat asked me to share my document with my instructions to the end user. I can't upload a document.
Yeah, if you send that to us, we'll share it out.
All right, sounds good. I've redacted it. Pretty ugly, but it's redacted. So
Cool.
Okay.
that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get that out to people.
Be good to take a look at that. Something I haven't authored yet.
Awesome. All right. So with that, just another thanks to Turn Digital for sponsoring our group and keeping the lights on. Very awesome. And we're down to a raffle.